Welcome everyone to episode 11 of Future Strong. My name's Nikki Garchea. I'm the co-founder of the global assessment and development business Capfinity, and I'm delighted to welcome my co-host Lindsay Pollock, who's had a busy week keynoting. We will find out what she's been up to. And our great guest today to talk about a topic that is close to many of your hearts, I know, from discussing it with you. We have Alexandra Levit and Dr. Stewart Shankman. So welcome to you both. Lindsay, tell us about your week. What have you been up to?
Nikki, is there something you want to say to me first? Today's my half birthday.
Tell me.
Yeah, half birthdays are a big deal. Yeah, thank you. My birthday's September 5th. It's March 5th. So, I'll get your gift later, I'm sure.
My virtual love and affection is coming across to you.
Half of it.
When Lindsay says something like, there's something you want to say to me, I normally think she's changed her background, because last week she had a new background and I didn't notice it. And I normally pick up on these things. So I was like, what's changed? What have you done to your background? Happy half birthday, Lindsay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for remembering. I'll get my half cake and my half. Do you guys celebrate halves like that with a half cake? This is like a thing, no? In quarantine, we have to celebrate everything. Anyway, I shall move on. We are episode 11, which I'm so excited about. Nikki, this week I had the pleasure and honor of speaking at the Wall Street Journal Jobs Summit. So welcome to our new followers who participated in the Jobs Summit. New jobs results just came out today. Jobs numbers in the United States, hiring is picking up a little bit. We'll see how that goes, but that's a really good sign as more people get vaccinated. But it is no secret that we are about to cross the 1 year mark of COVID in the United States. I don't know exactly how it's marked in the UK, but those anniversaries are coming up. So it's such a moment to take stock, right? And say, where are we? How are people doing? I've seen such an increase in articles and conversations about Zoom fatigue, isolation, loneliness, mental health and well-being, which, as you mentioned, is such a topic for employers, university career services. I just read an article about a university president at a military academy who moved into the dorms so he could see what it was like for the students that he was making decisions about. So I think we're really seeing just so much empathy and compassion. What's the mood in the UK as we hit the 1 year mark, Nikki?
I think reflective. I think there's a lot of... We've been in lockdown in a serious way for a long time. So one of the things that anyone who has children knows that we've just marked maybe the last Google Meet of the afternoon, because the kids go back on Monday. So for anyone who have kids, we are delighted, hopefully, to see our children in school for a bit longer, because these 8 weeks have not been good for anybody. Yeah, I think there is hope with the vaccine. But it's certainly been a long time. I think we'll cover this today, but resilience and the longevity, the resilience has had to be in place is I think what's on everyone's mind.
So our topic today is mental health, well-being, particularly related to job search and job loss. This is a very special episode for me because I have two very good friends from two very different parts of my life. Alexandra Levit is a fellow career author and coach. Her first book, They Don't Teach Corporate in College, came out around the same time as my first book, Getting from College to Career. And it was one of those things where everyone I talked to said, do you know Alexandra Levit? You must know Alexandra Levit. And we became fast and longtime friends. And Stewart Shankman, I have known way longer. We'll go into this a little bit later, but he and I grew up in the same hometown and went to Hebrew school together and have basically been reminiscing nonstop since we got on this call about all the different people we know and follow on Facebook. So ask me all the embarrassing questions about when I was a child. Stu will be happy to answer them. But that's my personal introduction to Alex and Stu. Alex, I'll toss it to you first. Can you tell us a little bit about your work today and about the project that we're here to talk about?
Sure. Well, hi, everybody. Hi, Nikki, Lindsay, Stu, and everybody listening. My name is Alexandra Levit, and I am a workforce and human capital consultant, author, and futurist. And for those of you who are not really sure what the term futurist means, it really just means it's someone that's looking at trends that are percolating up through the world and tries to determine what has the greatest potential for disruption. And when we look at COVID-19 and the aftermath, one of the things that we are looking at is the long-term mental health impact. So there are a couple things going on here. First of all, when people become unemployed, they tend to enter a vicious cycle of looking for jobs, not getting jobs, getting more depressed. And then when you're depressed, you lack the motivation to look for jobs. So we really see, unfortunately, a risk of people who became unemployed during the pandemic having a long-term problem with employment. And so we feel that an intervention that will help people get back to work, and not just back to any work, but back to gainful employment, that will allow them to sustain what we call career durability, or continuous employment over a long period of time that people find meaningful and rewarding. But that's really going to be the key to long-term recovery. And that's what Driven is about. So our project Driven is a depression return to work initiative. And the goal is to combine two things that are typically not coordinated with one another. You have career coaching and job training that Lindsay and I have been involved with for years. And then you have the cognitive behavioral therapeutic component that Stu can talk a little bit more about. And both of those have been shown to be highly efficacious individually. But we've never seen a program that combines both. And that's what we're hoping to do with Driven, which will include an app that participants can download, and also a bunch of supplementary materials and videos as well.
Stu, can you tell us a little bit about your work and your part in the project?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Stewart Shankman. I'm a professor and chief psychologist at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine here in Chicago, Illinois. And this project is sort of a very important one for me, and I think it's sort of important broadly for the field. Like Alexandra was saying, you get this vicious cycle when people with depression lose their job, where they lose their motivation to seek work, and then when they don't sort of meet any goals they might have for a week for number of jobs to apply for, or listings to sort of research about, they get sort of more down on themselves and more depressed, which leads them to have more loss of motivation, which leads to even less. You can imagine the cycle going on and on and on. And so this intervention combines evidence-based practices that we've been studying for years to help people with depression with job coaching. So this project would have techniques to increase people's motivation and drive, which is where Driven, the name, sort of comes from, is to increase people's what we call hedonic capacity, their interest to get the goals that they want and to really motivate themselves. But when we say goals, it's not just about finding a job, but really trying to have people have little steps at a time, because it's those little nuggets, those little rewards that really maintain motivation. It's not, I'm going to find a job this week. It's, can I spend 10 minutes looking on LinkedIn about jobs that I might be interested in me? Just that little activity is extremely motivating. And so having those types of goals in mind is one of the things that we're trying to target in Driven.
So let's dig in a little bit to the mental health component of job hunting. I've read some research that job loss can feel like grief. Obviously, there's a lot of anxiety around job hunting, even someone who doesn't have diagnosed depression. Can you talk a little bit just about the mental health components related to career in general, even somebody who is employed and has anxiety or depression? I think we're talking about it a lot way out of context related to COVID. So can you just sort of ground us in how anxiety, depression, mental health concerns tend to overlap in the workplace in general?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess there's two parts to your question. Of one about sort of job loss, and I think job loss is what we call a life event, and life events are extremely disruptive in many ways. But I think losing your job in particular, it's a blow to one's identity, and where you sort of see yourself as a worker, as a productive member of society, and now that part of you is gone, and it really is an identity loss. And what goes along with identity loss is sort of loss of routine. So things like you no longer are maybe getting up in the morning and having breakfast at a particular time, or no longer catching that particular train that you've always caught. And we know that routine disruption can be very depressogenic. So one of the things that we try and do for people that have these types of disrupting events is try to maybe replace those routines with things that are more productive to sort of get them back kind of on track. And then the other part of your question about sort of mental health with people who are employed, we know, as we were talking about at the outset of this meeting, that COVID has been a huge source of stress for people worldwide. And I think employers are becoming more and more sensitive to that, not just in terms of being of maintaining sort of productivity in their employees, but just to kind of be good people. That it's sort of important to have a happy workforce and to attend to people's emotional needs. And it's trickier when people are working from home because you don't see people on a daily basis. You don't sort of know how they're sort of acting, and so you might just see them in these little snapshots. So it's sort of a little harder to keep tabs on how your employees are doing in these meetings that you sort of see throughout the day.
Yeah, I think what Stu mentions around employers is a critical part of what we're trying to do here. We recognize that there are a couple challenges that employers face. First of all, employers generally want managers to be empathetic, but this is an area where it has typically not been discussed in the workforce. Mental health, really, the support was limited to an employee assistance program where perhaps your manager would slip you a number or a website like, well, go here and talk about this. But personal and professional boundaries have really become blurred. And I think the need has been faster than the adoption of some of the strategies. So we see employers concerned about people who are currently employed. And then the other thing that we're seeing, and this is a trend that I'm kind of keeping up on my radar, is that employers are starting to offer more comprehensive outplacement services, meaning they know they have to let a bunch of people go. But they recognize letting people go is going to be harmful, not only for those individuals, but potentially for their brand and company reputation as well. And so being able to offer something where you really are fully supporting people in the best way you can, given financial realities, is something that employers are interested in and concerned about.
This sounds just something that's so needed at these times, and I think it's sometimes been a bit of a taboo subject for employers and career services to broach this. So the coming together of these two disciplines, I think, is incredible. How do you, when you think about, I guess, developing content for Driven from both of your disciplines, what are some of the things that you consider, I guess, from an evidence base that really needs to be on a program like this so that people can feel that sense of progress and hopefully, I guess, stay within the program, keep using the app? But I'd love to hear some of the things, the decisions you've taken to include certain pieces of content because you feel like they're really going to have an impact on people.
Stu, do you want to start with the evidence strategy?
Yeah, I guess I can talk about the mental health side of things. And there's sort of a few different strategies that we're really trying to implement in Driven. One is called behavioral activation. And behavioral activation is sort of a series of techniques. It's been studied for, now probably about 25 years for people with, clinical depression. And it's been, compared to medication and shown just to be just as efficacious as medication in terms of short-term and long-term efficacy. And the gist of behavioral activation is about scheduling events that give you pleasure and mastery. So scheduling activities in your life that give you this sense of self-efficacy, that give you a sense of enjoyment, but also things that you have mastery over so that you don't feel like the world is sort of bebopping you around like a pinball, but that you have some control over your own environment, over your own well-being. And as I've mentioned before, it could be small things. It could be, today I'm going to have some bagel bites because bagel bites give me enjoyment. And at 10 o'clock this morning, I'm going to have some bagel bites. So you go and microwave some bagel bites and then you eat these bagel bites. It's like that this gave me some control over my emotions. I enjoy the taste of bagel bites and I have some sense of mastery, and it gave me just a little bit of a hedonic kick, a little bit of pleasure. And also it's not just with eating, but could also be I'm going to schedule time to spend researching on LinkedIn different jobs. And it might only be 10 minutes, it might only be 5 minutes, but just having that sense of mastery and having that sense of accomplishment is really important. So that's one piece, behavioral activation. The other piece is learning about cognitive flexibility. And I think it's often talked about in the context of sort of executive functioning and things like that. But cognitive flexibility is very, very relevant to depression. And so cognitive flexibility is basically the ability to sort of shift sets in your mind and being able to, okay, well, instead of me just doing X, what if I do Y? And not just getting stuck on X. And because we know with depression is often associated with rumination and sort of these repetitive thinking. So if we can help people sort of shift their sets, shift how they're thinking, that'll help them sort of seek jobs. So more specifically, if you have this idea of this is the only type of job that I could have, this is the only type of skills that I have, and you get very stuck on that type of thinking, can you shift your mindset a little bit? Can you think, well, are there can I adapt these skills that I had in my job to something else? Can you get, and just that kind of basic cognitive process of being able to shift sets, I mean, we think would be really helpful for people seeking work.
And I would say that what makes this offering unique, we hope, is that some of these strategies that Stu has cited, cognitive flexibility and behavioral activation, incorporating those into a new model that I've been working on with DeVry University around career durability. So I briefly mentioned that this means being able to maintain gainful and rewarding employment over a longer period of time. And it's influenced by things like COVID-19 and other disruptions, and also automation. Automation is going to render a lot of people redundant. People are going to have to reskill and upskill in response to this. And so career durability is really a protective factor around that, but we need to teach people how to do it. And so there are a couple different components. There's mastery of hard skills and soft skills, depending on your field. There is applied technology skills, which refers to being able to leverage people, products, data, and devices to do your job better. So in other words, if you're an accountant, you would be very familiar with the latest and greatest accounting software that could shave time off your day to be involved in more strategic matters. There's institutional knowledge, which just refers to being in one place for long enough that you've kind of seen everything. I have a client, BNSF Railroad, where some of these guys have been working on the railroad for 20 years, and they have all the institutional knowledge you could ever imagine, and they have seen it all. And there's a lot of value in that. But with career durability, you have to figure out a way to translate that. And then last of all is growth mindset. Being willing to say, you know what, I don't know everything now. I don't know where my career is necessarily going to be in 5 to 10 years, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to seek out information from different sources. I don't necessarily have to go back and get a 4-year degree. I might just take an online course. I might do a shadow. I might mentor. There's a variety of ways we can learn new skills, and having a growth mindset will put you in a good position to do that. So what we're going to be doing with Driven is really targeting some of these strategies that Stu talks about that are evidence-based toward helping people increase their career durability.
I love that combination, that holistic approach. Nikki, I'd love to bring in strengths here, especially on that growth mindset piece. Can you talk about the overlap of strengths with this mental health conversation, and especially what you've been seeing in the difference in strengths of people from the beginning of COVID to now?
Thanks, Lindsay. And as Stewart was speaking, I was thinking about a lot of the work that we saw in positive psychology, many of which I think is based on aspects of cognitive behavior therapy. And you're making me smile when you're talking about mastery, because it's a word I've not heard for a while, and it's so true. And I think sometimes hard to accomplish at these times as well. So it's an incredible thing to be remembering. From a strengths perspective, where strengths, I think, have a role to play, particularly in the sustainability of things like resilience, is that they help to build an aspect of positive emotional resource. So they are a strong reminder of the things that make you feel strong. They give you energy. And as you know, Lindsay, our model is not just about strengths, it's holistic. So we're acknowledging also those things that drain you and you're weaker at. I also think, and I was thinking about your book Recalculating, actually, as we were talking about career, was it durability? Strengths also give you a different lens to think about what might be transferable, those things that perhaps you haven't been using so much, but are available to you. And I guess that's always our message to early career talent is, if you were going for one particular job and that wasn't now open to you, what actually could you do with your strengths to pivot and find those new opportunities? Hence my thought on recalculating. So I think there's definite kind of parts of strengths and positive psychology that I can hear coming through, certainly this evidence base. And I'm loving the model and the evidence. So thank you.
I bring you a psychologist. That is my gift to you.
I know, look, and I didn't even bring you a half birthday cake. So,
Shouting out recalculating is my half birthday gift. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Alex, you are such a respected, excellent public speaker to corporations. You're a consultant. I want to bring in that lens of what employers can do. We have a lot of recruiters who watch, a lot of program development, learning and development people, and forget about the company. Let's just say you're a caring HR professional or recruiter. What is the role that an individual can play to support this? And just to give an example, Erica Keswin, who's the author of Rituals Roadmap, says, one small thing you can do is say to people, how are you? How are you really? Right? And show that empathy. So what are some things that just the average professional who cares can have in their toolkit?
Well, I think knowing what resources are immediately available in your organization. I mean, it's in terms of our initiative, I mean, we just love to hear from people saying, yeah, this is a great idea. We would be interested in taking a look, maybe serving on your advisory board. And that's enough for us right now. And then, of course, we'll be looking for people to pilot it and try it out and let us know with their employee populations what the results are, because we are going to be able to measure those results. But I think barring that you don't have Driven at your disposal right now, I think knowing what you do have at your disposal is very important. So if you're not in HR, you want to be talking with HR, with comp and benefits about what you can offer today. So individuals are trying to access employee assistance programs. Sometimes this is easier than other times. So you want to make sure that if you're giving this information over to a direct report, for example, that you know pretty much exactly what's going to happen. Because I think the worry on my part, at least, is that you would give that number, give that website, and then it doesn't lead anywhere. It's a dead end. For whatever reason, the system is broken. And then that person feels like their organization has let them down, that the world has let them down. So you want to know what resources are available and know that they work, and then check in with the person. Did you have a chance to tap into that resource? If you want to talk to me about it, you are welcome to. I think you do have to be a little bit careful that some employees will go a little bit overboard with their managers and using their managers as a crutch for support. And it's one thing to show empathy and to show concern, but you don't want to be that person's everyday therapist. So knowing where to set the line and also what other resources you can call on that can give you a little bit of extra help, particularly if someone is in a dangerous situation. You don't want to try and handle that yourself. And maybe Stu has some other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that line of particularly people who are really impaired, who are really struggling is really important, particularly if they're working remotely, where you don't sort of see them on a regular basis and you just kind of see in these intermittent meetings. I think employers want to be careful of sort of biting off more than they can chew, whether it's employers or HR professionals. And so knowing what resources, knowing what kind of maybe suicide hotlines are available, and there's all sorts of resources that are available 24/7 for people that are really struggling.
Stu, you're associated with Northwestern University. Any advice for people on university campuses? I'm really concerned about students at such a vulnerable place, remotely, some are on campus. Can you just talk a little bit? I know you're affiliated with the medical school, but can you just talk a little bit about the academic environment and these issues?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, a lot of students, particularly seniors, we work with a lot of students who are in our research labs and who are trying to get a foot in and finding out about research and sort of thinking about sort of the next step. And they're really struggling. The job numbers are getting better, as we sort of are mentioning before. But for graduating seniors, they're worrying about, well, what types of jobs are going to be available to me, and as Alex was mentioning before, with sort of increased automation, or certain industries that I would maybe thinking about, are they going to be dead in 5 to 10 years? And so I think having teaching having university employee services, being aware of different options that might be available to their students is really important, and not just thinking like, oh, they'll be fine and they'll find something. They're smart kids and they'll move on. But also just being aware that this is a very trying time for everybody, and for people that are sort of going through this life transition of graduating college into employee. That's sort of another factor that's going to compound any kind of mental health problems that they might be experiencing.
Yeah, and I know that we've alluded to this before, but I think we're just at the beginning of people's realization that this has been an extremely traumatic, stressful period. I'm not saying we're all going to have collective PTSD, but it might be something along those lines. Right now, we've all been in survival mode. Okay, well, how do we get through the day? But what happens when the immediate crisis is past? I think that's when we're going to see the biggest problems. And just to add to Stu's point around graduating seniors, I think that it's important for both career services and hiring managers to understand that when you are onboarding someone fully virtually who has never worked in an in-person business environment, that requires something different. We're expecting people who have 5, 10, 20 years of experience to onboard virtually, and that's weird, but it's a little bit easier for them because they've had experience solving conflicts in person, being diplomatic, getting people to collaborate with you, the things that Lindsay and I talk about in our books. It's a little bit easier when you have that face-to-face contact. When you've never had that and you have no context, it's extremely difficult. And I think that that's a little bit of an uphill battle for career services and employers alike to prepare students for that. But I think awareness is really the first step there. So understanding that this is something that we have to address. We can't just throw graduating seniors out there and hope for the best. And so by using strategies that some of which we've talked about today, I think we can make sure that they're at least as well prepared as they can be. That's not to say it won't be difficult to work fully remotely when you've never worked before, but by paying attention to it and just putting a spotlight on it, I think we can really help.
You touched on this with some of the things that you were just sharing regarding what people have been through in the pandemic. One of the things that I am concerned about when we think about the longevity of people's experience of this globally, and it's clearly been varied by country, by personal experience, is that typically when we experience a loss or a grief, there is an element of processing. There might be rituals around that processing, but there is memorials, there is things that happen that give us a period of time to process. And I'm concerned on really at a global level that we are at pace trying to move from one experience into the next, whether that's a normality, whether it's an adjustment to a new reality. And, you know, I own a business. I worry about even our own desire to get back into the office or do certain things, but we've not really had a chance to work through our experiences. As professionals in this space, do you have views on that processing piece?
Yeah, or learn from them. And this is, Nikki, it's very interesting you bring this up because just in the last 2 weeks, I've been hearing a lot of murmuring. I don't know if you all are hearing the same thing, Lindsay. I don't know if you are, about, we're going back to the office in 2 months. Yeah, we're just going back. It's like, what have we learned from the last year? Can we do things a little bit differently? Can we meet in the middle? And honestly, it's been a bit surprising that there's not more reflection, that you're exactly what you're talking about, Nikki. And so that's what I would really recommend, is that organizations and individuals like take stock of the last year and figure out, okay, well, let me use this as a starting point to build my future life. What have I learned that's good? What have I learned that I could improve upon? What do I have control over? As Stu was saying, what do I not have control over? And take that time, because just jumping back into what was or trying to, I think is going to be a recipe for disappointment for a lot of individuals and organizations.
And just to add to that, I totally agree that, you know, reflecting on this sort of past year is really important. But I think there's a line, I think, between reflecting and ruminating, and sort of and dwelling and sort of being sort of down on, like, oh, I can't believe that happened, and you hear and sort of going over it over in your head, and having more of this, what can I learn in a positive way from what I did, and sort of celebrating those successes. So celebrating as an employer, as a university career service person, of that, okay, well, what did we do in the situation? What can we learn from it? And yes, it wasn't ideal, and yes, we didn't plan for it, but are there certain things that, you know, worked out pretty well? And can we sort of apply that in the future when we sort of go back to the office or back to situations?
Yeah, and they are the heroes. HR professionals, career services professionals, I think everybody recognized that, talk about essential workers. I mean, they're kind of the unsung essential workers of figuring out how we're going to make business continue when we really weren't prepared for this at all. And I think that they've done remarkably well. And so acknowledging that, just like Stu said, I think is really important. It's a great point.
Couldn't agree more. My cousin was a 2020 college graduate, and the lack of walking across the stage and getting her diploma. It's the lack of closure, right? Yeah. And she said that is the hardest part. And so I think as we have those sermons, think of a funeral, right? It's closure. And not having that is just so traumatic for people. So I couldn't agree more. Nikki, do you want to say a few final words? And then Alex and Stu, I wanted to give you a chance to let people know how to find out more about each of you and your work. Nikki?
Just wanted to thank you both. I'm left leaving this session thinking we need to find kind of new rituals in a positive way to support the processing. Many of the things that you've shared here, I think people will have found incredibly practical. I can take things today from the messages you've said. So I think Driven will be a huge success. And I think the combination of what you're both bringing to this is amazing. But thank you so much for sharing this with the Future Strong audience. It certainly speaks to what we're trying to achieve, Lindsay. So thank you very, very much.
Alex, can you tell everyone how to find you? And then Stu, and by the way, Stu, you haven't changed a bit. You look fabulous. 30 years later, I'd recognize you on the street. You don't have your green band jacket, but otherwise.
I've aged so much in the 15 years you've known me.
Oh my God. I was going to say, Alex, you look even better. You look even better. So Alex and Stu, tell people how to find you. Alex, go first.
You can find me at alexandralevit.com and also via Twitter or LinkedIn. LinkedIn is just Alexandra Levit and Twitter is at @alevit, ALEVIT. Look forward to hearing from people. If you've got feedback on Driven, just ideas you have or input, or we would just love to hear that. So please do share.
Great. Stu?
And you can find my lab. I think the link is going to show up in a minute at the NEAR lab at Northwestern University. I'm also available on LinkedIn if people wanted to reach out. And we also have lots of other research studies that we're doing sort of outside of this career space stuff. So if people are in the Chicago area and want to participate in research and kind of give back to science, we have a recruitment link on our website for people to check out.
Your work is so important. Thank you both for everything you do. Nikki, thank you for your work as well and for being here with us today.
Wonderful.
You for your, Lindsay, and Recalculating Lindsay's new book. Check it out.
She's really got it right there.
I like your hair much better now than when you were 11 years old.
Oh my God, I had such a poof. Did I not have a poof? I finally figured out my hair. Yeah, that's your memory of me. Fabulous. Wonderful.
Maybe we can start episode 12 with those photographs.
I will commit. If people tune in next week, courtesy of Stewart Shankman, I will show that photo.
Next week we have a week off because we are committed to some client work together. So next week we have a week off, and then we have James Boyle from Latham & Watkins talking about early in careers in the legal sector at these times. So we won't see you next week. We will see you for episode 12, 2 weeks from now. And Alex and Stewart, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Lindsay. Appreciate it.